One cold winter morning, an unexpected and dramatic event disrupted the quiet routine of a family, transforming an ordinary day into a nightmare. But what really happened that day? Before we begin, I invite you to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other exciting stories like this one. Enjoy! Luca had always been a man of few words but of great integrity. From an early age, he had dreamed of becoming a policeman, inspired by an innate sense of justice that drove him to want to protect others. Growing up in a modest neighborhood in Siena, Luca spent his days exploring the streets of his city with his inseparable friend, Roberto. Together, they formed an unbeatable duo, always looking for new adventures, but with a deep respect for others that made them loved by everyone in the neighborhood. Roberto, unlike Luca, had inherited the family shop, a small general store that served as a point of reference for the local community. Although life had taken them on different paths, the friendship between Luca and Roberto had remained strong, an indissoluble bond that time had never been able to undermine. Roberto had married Francesca, a sweet and affectionate woman, and together they had a daughter, Giulia, a girl full of life and dreams, who adored her uncle Luca. Every time she saw him pass by on patrol, she greeted him with a radiant smile, a gesture that had become a daily ritual. Giulia, even though she was on the verge of adolescence, had never stopped considering Luca a hero. Her affection for him was evident, and every day, when she saw him pass by in the car, she ran to the window to say hello. It was a small gesture, but it meant a lot to Luca. He saw in Giulia not only his granddaughter, but also the hope for a better future, that spark of innocence that was worth protecting at all costs. One day, however, something changed. That morning, Giulia left home to go to school, as she always did. It was a morning like many others, with the sun beginning to warm the streets of Siena and life resuming its ordinary course. Roberto had already left to open the shop, and Francesca was taking care of the last household chores before starting her day. Nothing seemed out of place. Everything was proceeding as usual. But the tranquility of that morning was suddenly broken by an unexpected event. As she walked towards school, Giulia encountered a young man she had never seen before. His face was tense, and his cold eyes conveyed a sense of danger that Giulia sensed immediately. Before she could react, the man grabbed her arm, forcing her to turn back toward the house. When Giulia entered the house with the robber, Francesca immediately understood that something terrible was about to happen. The young man pulled out a knife, threatening the family and asking where the money from the store was. Roberto was not there, and Francesca, in a panic, tried to explain that the money was at the store, offering the key so that the man could go and get it. But the robber did not trust her and decided to take Giulia with him as collateral, leaving Francesca in a state of absolute terror. The tension was palpable, as Giulia, terrified but trying to keep her cool, was dragged out of the house. As they headed toward the store, they encountered Luca, who was patrolling as usual. Giulia, who usually ran to greet him, this time lowered her gaze and walked past him, without even giving him a nod. Luca immediately noticed his niece's strange behavior. That missed greeting set off an alarm bell in his mind. Something was wrong. Luca's heart began to beat faster. and a sense of uneasiness filled him. Without hesitation, he discreetly made a call to the police station, explaining the situation and asking for backup. He continued to follow Julia and the robber, maintaining a safe distance so as not to alarm the man, but ready to intervene at the slightest sign of danger. As they approached the store, the tension reached its peak. Julia trembled, knowing that her life was in the hands of a desperate man. Luca, his heart in his throat, watched every movement, hoping for an opportunity to intervene without endangering the life of his beloved niece. If you find this story compelling, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more stories like this. Thank you for your support. Once they reached the store, the robber forced Julia to enter, closing the door behind them. But Luca was not far away. Moments later, more police cars arrived, surrounding the building. The robber, realizing he was trapped, knew he had no way out. His desperation was evident as he looked at Julia, knowing he was at the end of his rope. At that moment, the fate of all the protagonists was decided in a few moments. The robber, now without hope, did the only thing he could do. He gave up, leaving Julia free and throwing the knife to the ground. Julia, shaken but unharmed, ran out of the store, where Luca was waiting for her. With tears in her eyes, she threw herself into her uncle's arms, knowing that she was finally safe. Luca, with a relieved smile, reassured her, "Everything is fine, Julia. You are safe now." Together, they returned home, where they found Roberto and Francesca still locked in the bathroom, distressed and helpless. When Luca opened the door and saw them, the expression of terror on their faces melted into tears of relief. "Julia is fine," Luca said, hugging Roberto. "We caught the robber." Roberto, his eyes full of tears, hugged Luca with all his strength, whispering a simple, "Thank you." It was a thank you that carried with it all the weight of the anguish he had felt, but also the infinite gratitude for the friend who had been there in his time of need.